Well, thank you very much for that kind introduction. And as Captain Brenda said, yes, I'm going to be giving some guidance on how to use the FDA's inactive ingredients database and basically just cover some best practices and considerations. So here's just an outline for today's presentation. I'll be providing you an overview of the inactive ingredient database. We're going to talk about how to use it. We're going to talk about how to calculate the maximum daily exposure. And also we're going to talk about the IID program enhancements under GDUFA. We're also going to talk about a special case with the red dye number 3, and I'll provide you some helpful resources, our IID mailbox, and contact information. So what is the IID, the Inactive Ingredient Database? Here's basically a snapshot of how it looks. If you go on the FDA website and you just search for the Inactive Ingredient Database, you will come to this homepage where you can search for the excipients and ingredient name. So the IID provides information on excipients present in FDA-approved drug products. In 1987, FDA first made available an inactive ingredient guide, and this was available in hard copy paper format. And FDA began making the information available in an online database in 2003. So the IID provides information on excipients present, as I said earlier, in FDA-approved drug products. It includes excipients in ANDAs, which are the abbreviated new drug applications, and new drug applications, which are known as the NDAs. And of note, excipients in approved biologics license applications, our BLAs, and our over-the-counter monograph drug products, OTC products, are not contained in the IID. Now, if an excipient is used in an approved drug product for a particular route of administration, the excipient generally is not considered new and may warrant less extensive review the next time it is included in a new drug product. So again, just showing you the homepage of the IID. And what you'll do is you'll see here, if you're like, oh my gosh, how do I know how to use the inactive ingredient database? There's a guidance for industry that has been posted, and it provides you information about what the inactive and active ingredients are. It also provides recommendations for how to use the IID in the development of drug products and how it can be used in evaluating excipient safety, how it's structured, the data regarding excipients, and how nomenclature, maximum potency levels, and units of measure are presented. It also describes the database's benefits and limitations. The draft guidance uses the term excipient rather than inactive ingredient. And it's just because historically the term inactive ingredient was used in naming the database. So the excipient may be more accurate, right? So the term excipient may be more accurate because it recognizes that some ingredients may have some biological activity, even though they are not intended to exert therapeutic effects. So while the guidance uses the term excipient, I will be using the terms excipients and inactive ingredients interchangeably. And of course, let's not forget the FAQs. You are welcome to check them out. Here you'll find like frequently asked questions regarding, what the inactive active ingredient means. It explains some of the data you will see after doing a search and how it is updated and how to obtain a copy. Moving along, let's talk about how to use the IID. This is a snapshot of the IID database. So let's say you want to download the entire IID. You will simply click on the ingredients database download link, and that will give you the ability to download the entire IID to your computer. If you would like to initiate a search for a specific excipient, all you have to do is enter the first 3 characters of the excipient name, and then click submit, or you can actually select the alphabetical the first letter of the excipient name and search for the specific excipient that you're looking for. So this is exactly a query result that will come in. Let's take the example of Carbamare homopolymer. And as you can see, there are different forms, different grades, type B, type C, type A. And for each of this, for each of the excipients shown here and within the specific grade, you will see there's a specific route of administration. For each record. There's also a dosage form for each record. There's a Unicode. And then you will have either the maximum potency per unit dose that's listed or the maximum daily exposure that's listed. And if a record was updated, you will see a yes or a no. You would also see, as I said earlier, the CAS number and the Unicode. The CAS actually stands for the Chemical Abstract Service Registry number that is associated with the specific excipient, and along with the Unicode, which will be highlighted. However, it's not highlighted in this example, but the UNI stands for the Unique Ingredient Identifier that's assigned by FDA's Global Substance Registration System. Each record is showing a unique excipient or inactive ingredient associated with the route of administration. Here it's topical, and the dosage form combination. And here it's in cream. And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, for each record, you're going to have either or. Either you're going to have the maximum potency per unit dose, or you're going to have the maximum daily exposure value that is associated with each excipient. And again, any changes made to the record will reflect a yes or a no. So interestingly, we do have some limitations when it comes to the IID. It does not provide context of use. What does that mean? So if there's a duration of exposure, you want to see if it was chronically used or acutely used, it doesn't show that. It doesn't indicate that in the IID. Also, it doesn't indicate the patient population and indications for use. What's interesting also for us is that the IID, this is something that we really believe in as FDA. We do not disclose proprietary excipient information. So you're not going to see the reference list and drug formulation associated with the specific excipient record. And there isn't a link between the maximum potency per unit dose and the maximum daily exposure for each record. So don't think that they're associated, okay? It's either or. And lastly, as I mentioned earlier, we do include excipients from that are listed in the NDAs and ANDAs, but not BLAs or over-the-counter OTC monograph products. So interestingly now, how do you calculate the maximum daily exposure, right, for products, which is also known as the maximum daily intake for oral products? You will simply just follow this formula. It is the maximum daily exposure is equal to the maximum number of dosage units recommended per day based on the product labeling multiplied by the dosage unit level of the inactive ingredient or excipient. So let's say you have an excipient level of 20 milligrams per dosage unit. You'll multiply that by the number of dosage units that are recommended for that day. So if it's 2 dosage units recommended for that day, then you have a total of 40 milligrams maximum daily exposure or maximum daily intake for the specific product, okay? And since we're talking about oral medication here, we'll talk about the MDI. So the MDI will be 40 milligrams for this specific oral product. So now let's talk about the IID program enhancements. Congress first enacted the Generic Drug User Fee Act, or what we call the GDUFA, in 2012. Following negotiations between FDA and industry with input from public stakeholders like you, I believe most of you are here today, and GDUFA was implemented to ensure that patients have access to safe, high quality, and affordable generic drugs, and it brings greater predictability and timeliness to the assessment of generic drug applications. IID enhancements were included in the commitment letter of GDUFA 2. Specifically, the commitment letter stated that by October 1st, 2020, FDA will complete enhancements to the inactive ingredient database so users can perform electronic queries to obtain accurate maximum daily intake and maximum daily exposure information for each route of administration for which data is available. FDA will update the inactive ingredient database on an ongoing basis, and this is what we do on a post. We'll post quarterly notice of updates made. This is what we've been doing. And also such notices will include each change made, and for each change, the information replaced. Then GDUFA was reauthorized, and we continued with our commitments to update the IID on an ongoing basis and post quarterly notices of updates made. The addition of MDE, so our maximum daily exposure to the IID, was an important addition to the GDUFA 3 commitment letter that was based on stakeholder feedback to really benefit the end user. Now, since after submission, my office looks at it from an MDE perspective. We were looking at different bases or different database bases and other sources than the publicly facing IID that only contained per unit dose information. So I think it's definitely beneficial that we are all looking at the similar information now, mainly for those that have MDE populated. And next slide, I'm just showing you how we have continued to provide quarterly updates. We started July 2020 with 4% records that were filled with MDEs, and now we are at 44%, and we continue to increase steadily. As I continue with the enhancements, let's talk about the quarterly change log. So when you go to the inactive ingredient database and you search, right, for any product, but you can also get access by clicking on the most recent changes to the database link. You will be able to download the quarterly change log. And the quarterly change log shows 3 types of status changes. You either have C for corrected records, D for deleted records, or R for replacement records. In the interest of time, let me go back here. For C, so whenever there's a record that is corrected, right, it is important to note that new records are displayed on the primary IID webpage. Okay, you will not find it here in the quarterly change log. And the MDE records that are higher than the previous quarter are also displayed on the primary IID webpage. What you will find here in the quarterly change log are the changes, current changes that are made because you have a change to the ingredient name, unit of measure, or potency that were corrected in the current quarterly IID. Note that the potency corrections that resulted in a decreased potency value are displayed in the change log. So for instance, you have thromethamine topical gel. As you can see, there was a replacement, right? There was a change. It changed from 144 milligrams to 56 milligrams. And so these are the types of changes that will be made, and we will illustrate that in the quarterly change log. Next, you have D for deletion. We don't really like to delete records. They're not really deleted from the IID. However, there's always a tracking of these, and you will find them in the change log. And so let's say for safety reasons, an excipient that was contained in a drug product, the drug product was deemed unsafe and it was withdrawn, we will delete the record and place it in the change log. And then as far as the replacements goes, with the notation of R, it is when we have replaced a maximum potency per unit dose with a maximum daily exposure. Okay, and as you can see, subsequent records will show that in the quarter, you'll have either the replacement of potency for MDE value. So please continue to monitor the IID and please get access also to the change log for additional information. And so, of course, you may be wondering, where are these changes, or what rises, what gives way to these changes? So we have the MDEs that come in from newly approved products, and we also have MDEs that come from previously approved products. One thing to mention is that we've been populating this IID since 2019. And so just imagine all the products that were approved prior to 2019. So we continue to form internal work groups. We have SMEs, subject matter experts, that are calculating the MDDs, which will allow us to calculate the MDEs, and then we'll use that to populate the IID. I just want to quickly just touch over, some situations where we have to remove an excipient from the IID, and this is a special consideration, is the red dye number 3, also known as erythrocin. So the FDA had published a Federal Register notice, and they posted this last year on January 15. And what happened was it was pretty much to address a ban. And so FDA revised 21 CFR color additive regulations to remove red number 3, and drug manufacturers now have until January 18, 2028 to remove this color additive. So what action did we take? We had to definitely remove red number 3, red dye number 3, and erythrocin, and any alternate name that was associated with the red dye number 3. And here are some resources if you're interested to learn more about what actions we had to take. I've also added here some more information regarding the other color additives that were of concern, but just visit the website for updated information on these. And so I just want to leave you with some helpful resources. Again, this is our search page for the inactive ingredient database. You have the guidance, the draft guidance, and also the FAQs as well. If you do have any questions, which we do get a lot of questions, we welcome those because, we keep trying to improve the IID. So we want to hear from you. So any question about changes in the IID listings or reports of error that you find, please feel free to email us. And then if you have requests for clarification of units or excipient names or anything that has to do with the identity of the excipient record, feel free to also email us. However, we will only take general inquiries if you send it to the mailbox. What are we not going to be able to answer? Questions that may disclose proprietary information. For instance, you have an excipient record. What was the associated NDA or ANDA to this specific record? Or what is the reference listed drug product formulation? We cannot disclose that. That is proprietary information, and that's so important to FDA. Also, we, as far as acceptability of proposed excipient levels, we will not be able to respond to that through the IID mailbox. However, for general inquiries, feel free to send your questions and concerns to the IID update at fda.hhs.gov mail inbox. And nomenclature corrections, questions about excipient names, and uni requests, you can send that to FDA-SRS@fda.hhs.gov. And lastly, for any application-specific questions related to the use of excipients in generic products and under development should be submitted through the control correspondence. And there is a 60-day turnaround for those, so it's pretty fast. So feel free to submit your questions to that route as it relates to the specifically to the application. And so, of course, I just want to thank the dedicated team that work hard behind the scenes. We are definitely doing a lot of work trying to enhance the IID, responding to all the questions that you may have, and communicating as well internally and externally with our stakeholders. So, of course, here's a list of everyone who is involved. It takes a whole village, right? And that's the end of my presentation. And thank you so much for your generous listening. But right now, I want to call over Melanie, who I like to call Dr. Mueller. Please come over. Thank you. Who will be presenting on the standardized approaches, right, for MDDs. Thank you very much.